Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination. News, newsmakers, talking points, and we have plenty on the show tonight. That big visit of the Russian President Vladimir Putin begins tomorrow in the national capital. We'll have a lot to talk about. Remember, India today is getting a world exclusive on Vladimir Putin. More on that. Is Russia still India's all-weather friend? We'll also raise the other big issue which concerns the rupee. The rupee has gone to an all-time low. What does it mean for the Indian economy? So there's plenty, as always, on the news today. First, of course, to bring you a very important update. Remember, we are tracking that big visit of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who will arrive in the national capital today. His first visit to the country since the Ukraine war. And an important update. Remember, India today had promised you an exclusive interview, a world exclusive, with the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, just a day before he arrives in India for that awaited bilateral meet with Prime Minister Modi. That interview was delayed today because of prior commitments of the Russian president. But we can now confirm that the interview has begun and will come to you soon on India Today TV. Just to give you a preview, my colleagues Geeta Mohan and Anjana Om Kashyap are in Moscow and they have this update for you.
नमस्कार, आप देख रहे हैं आज तक। आपके साथ मैं हूं अंजना ओम कश्यप और मेरी सहयोगी गीता मोहन। हम दोनों इंतजार कर रहे हैं, 9 बज गए हैं और जिस ऐतिहासिक इंटरव्यू का आप इंतजार कर रहे हैं उसमें थोड़ी सी, चूंकि राष्ट्रपति पुतिन की व्यस्तता चल रही है तो थोड़ा सा डिले चल रहा है, लेकिन ये दिन हमेशा के लिए इतिहास के पन्नों में दर्ज होगा, क्योंकि राष्ट्रपति पुतिन के भारत दौरे के पहले इंडिया टुडे आज तक ग्रुप का सबसे बड़ा ये धमाकेदार इंटरव्यू होने वाला है, जिसमें राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप को लेकर वो क्या सोचते हैं, जिसमें प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी से अपनी मुलाकात को लेकर वो क्या सोचते हैं, भारत और रूस के रिश्ते कैसे आगे बढ़ेंगे, इन सब पर हम उनसे सवाल बस कुछ ही देर में डालने वाले हैं।
That's right. We are here at the Ekaterina Hall, and that's the hot seat. We promised you an interview, and the biggest interview not just of the year, but maybe of years. And this interview is going to happen no matter what. We promised 9 p.m. and there is a delay because President Putin is occupied with very important meetings yesterday and today. We'll talk about that when he comes to that hot seat. Stay tuned, keep watching, don't miss the biggest interview of the year. Stay tuned to Aaj Tak and India Today.
Now remember, all eyes are on Vladimir Putin as he arrives in Delhi. Remember, the Russia-Ukraine war still shadows this visit to the country. Ahead of this visit, Russia's State Duma has cleared the defense pact, which will give India and Russia shared access to ports, airspace, and military logistics. Why is this such an important visit at the time at which it's taking place? That's going to be our top focus for now. Take a look at this report.
A big defense shake-up just hours before Vladimir Putin lands in Delhi. In a major pre-visit surprise, Russia's lower house, the State Duma, has ratified the reciprocal exchange of logistic support, aka the Reloads Pact, giving a fresh push to the India-Russia defense partnership. RELOS allows the mutual use of airspace and ports by Indian and Russian warships and aircraft and sets rules for logistics. RELOS is used during joint military exercises and humanitarian missions, disaster relief operations, and other coordinated deployments. And just hours before the ratification, President Vladimir Putin underscored the importance of India in Moscow's global strategy.
Действовать на внешнем контуре, исходя из собственных национальных интересов.
We will fulfill our obligations to foreign partners and expand cooperation with those countries that are interested in it. As I have already said, the vast majority of countries act rationally and pragmatically. Over the past 3 years, we have significantly increased our trade volume with them. First and foremost, I mean our key partners, China and India, with whom we share many years of friendship and strategic cooperation.
Имею в виду ключевых партнеров – Китай, Индию.
Ahead of the visit, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov also hinted at big defense conversations, including renewed discussions around the Su-57 next-generation fighter, joint aerospace projects.
So, Su-57s, best plane in the world. Yes, it's not over-exaggeration. It's the best plane in the world. And the issue of Su-57s certainly will be on the agenda during the coming visit. So let's not speak about the details. There are lots of competitors in the world, and some of the competitors are not, let's say, sticking their business to international law.
And this is where the timing matters. Putin's trip comes as India-US ties face their worst turbulence in nearly 20 years, with Washington slapping 50% tariffs on Indian goods, including 25% punitive levies on India's Russian oil imports. It also comes as Russia and the US negotiate the revised Trump-framed 19-point peace plan for Ukraine, putting New Delhi right in the middle of a shifting global triangle: Washington, Moscow, and New Delhi. A surprise ratification in Moscow, strong words from the Kremlin, and a hardening US line, all setting the stage for one of the most keenly watched India-Russia summits in years. Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now are special guests on that big issue with the big questions. Is India still Russia's all-weather friend? Should we treat Moscow as an all-weather friend? Can India really afford at this moment in global conflicts to put all their eggs in Putin's basket? Does India have any role to play at all in ending the Russia-Ukraine war? And how can India reduce its massive trade deficit with Russia? Those are some of the questions we'll put to you. Joining us are our special guests. Ajay Malhotra is former Indian ambassador to Russia. Alexei Zakharov is fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert and former advisor to India's National Security Council. And Rory Suchet is a presenter with Russia Today. Remember, RT India will be inaugurated by President Putin on his visit here. Appreciate all of you joining us here on the show today. Let me come first to you, Ajay Malhotra. Ambassador Malhotra, what do you see as really, why is this visit so important, coming at a time when we are not seeing an early end, as of now at least, to the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, this visit, the timing of this visit is not linked with the Russia-Ukraine war at all. This is an annual summit planned well in advance. It traditionally takes place in December. So to me, there's no surprise at all. In the past, from the Russian side, they always come in December. I don't think there have been many exceptions to that. So I don't see any change in that approach. If you look at why now...
But Mr. Putin chose not... Since the war, this is his first visit to India. In that context, does that shadow the visit in any way?
I don't think so. Because last year we visited, it's by rotation. The previous year in 2023, there was a miss because dates couldn't be worked out. It might have been mutually agreed to let that pass, and that's the way it was. But that is the only occasion when they have missed out, linked also with earlier with COVID. But otherwise, there's been a tradition of these visits, which I don't think you've had with any other country, whereas regularly since the year 2000, with as I said, the COVID and one other occasion, you've had these regular in and outgoing visits from both sides.
Let me get a Russian perspective for a moment. Alexei Zakharov, what is the importance Russia attaches to its relationship with India, given the fact that Russia has found itself isolated within Europe? Large parts of Europe today are questioning Russia for what it's done in Ukraine. We've even seen 3 ambassadors write an article in an Indian newspaper just 2 days ago. Then the Russian ambassador hits back. But the truth of the matter is, does Russia see India also as an all-weather friend? as India sees Moscow?
Yeah, I think that since the war in Ukraine, India's significance for Russian foreign policy only increased. And India has always been a long-standing friend, a strategic partner. But after being cut off from the European market and isolated from the West politically, I think that Russia started to reevaluate the partnership and it started to appreciate more India as a largest market. So we could see a lot of Russian effort to boost economic ties, to explore Indian market. There have been many Russian businesses making inroads into the Indian market, and there have been attempts from the Russian side to facilitate trade and economic cooperation through introducing different payment mechanisms, through increasing investment into the Indian economy. So in that sense, I think that India's importance, India's alliance has only grown further.
You know, it's interesting you're focusing on the trade aspect because India has a ballooning trade deficit at the moment with Russia. Brahma Chelani, do you believe that is one of India's concerns, or is India looking at Russia primarily, particularly in this visit, and Moscow as defense partners? That's where the real focus remains. Will it expand beyond that? Do you see actually a stronger relationship building, given also the ties that Russia has with China? Russia has also been signing defense deals with Pakistan in the recent time. How do you see the Russia-India relationship? Does it go beyond defense cooperation?
The relationship with Russia, Rajdeep, is very important, both for India's strategic interests and for better balance and greater maneuverability in Indian foreign policy. Without damaging the relationship with the US, which is equally important for India, India needs to uphold its special and privileged partnership with Russia. India needs both the US and Russia to counter China, to answer your question on China. So India needs both the US and Russia to counter China. The constant challenge for India is to carefully balance its foreign policy between Washington and Moscow so as to underpin India's independent approach to international affairs. The fact that US policy has pushed Russia closer to China makes it more imperative for India to maintain robust ties with Moscow. But look at the irony today. India's tried and tested partnership with Russia stands in stark contrast to America's erratic and punitive policy toward India. The US under Trump has slapped tariffs on India that exceed those on China. It has quoted Pakistan in ways that revive bitter Cold War memories, and it has singled India out for secondary sanctions while sparing other major Russian energy importers like the EU, Turkey, and Japan. In effect, Washington today is waging a quiet economic war on India. So against this background, Rajdeep, Putin's visit to India carries outsized geopolitical significance.
You know, it's interesting because Rory Suchet, Vladimir Putin, you're a presenter with Russian RT TV. How much importance will this visit be given in the Russian media itself? RT India is being launched now by Russia in this country, obviously to increase Russia's view of the world. But how important does Moscow see India? Is it seen as a strategic partner? Is it seen as a potential ally? How does Russia see India from your vantage point?
Russia sees India from not just a strategic point of view, but from a deeply entrusted friendship. This is something that goes back not just years, but decades. It goes back to the Soviet Union and beyond. I mean, a perfect example, the 1972 India War that really kicked off in 1971, that resulted in the creation of Bangladesh. The Soviet Union was militarily supporting India during this. And we all know that India was victorious in that war. But let's take a step away from that for a moment. Think about the body language, think about the embraces, but think about the language. My dear friend. That is how Putin refers to Modi. As we saw Modi saying, our all-weather friend, our trusted ally. This is an intrinsic partnership today. But it's not just about Russia and India. It's about the new multipolar world order as well. We're seeing Russia and India that have forged their position on the global stage now, standing upright in front of the world. When you say that Russia is isolated, it is not isolated. You've got the Euro-Atlantic Alliance that represents just 10% of the world. Let me say that again. The Euro-Atlantic Alliance represents 10% of the world. So the Western political and media landscape, with a very clear agenda to demonize Putin and so on and so forth, they say these kinds of things. But when you watch the way that when Putin attends a BRICS summit or the ASEAN summit, friends with the SCO, you see the leaders coming to Moscow. In no way, shape, or form is Putin isolated on the global stage. The partnership between Russia and India has stood the test of time and will continue to do so. The only worry is when you have someone like Donald Trump in the White House that likes to dish out his so-called tariffs that really are just sanctions, he is expediting the coagulation of strategic partnerships in the world. That is why we're seeing these new friendships and partnerships in the BRICS, the SCO, the ASEAN, and so forth. He is expediting the development and the maturation of this polycentric world order. And the people who stand on stage in this polycentric world order is India, Russia, the global south, China, and these countries are now standing up taller than ever before. Why? Because their focus is on their sovereign interests, something that Trump doesn't like.
I like the use, Rory, of the word that you're using, polycentric world order. Ajay Malhotra, that in a sense is the significance also in a way of what's happening, because we have now, as described just now, an erratic relationship or a relationship with all the ups and downs with an erratic US president who has imposed 25% extra penalties on India for buying Russian oil. And India seemingly has capitulated and agreed. Many Indian companies are reducing their dependence on Russian oil. Is it possible to balance Russia and America? Is it possible to really do that in this new world order?
You see, I don't believe India's role is to balance anyone against anything. We are there, a re-emerging power in our own right, and we should be treated accordingly by everyone. I think the Russians treat us with great respect, and so are the Americans till now. In fact, Trump, under his first administration, that's when we decided to call it a comprehensive global strategic partnership with America, when he came here in February 2020. With the Russians, there's no such problem, but we find with the Americans, suddenly you have, as you pointed out, the problems with tariffs, the problems with sanctions, the problems with H-1B visas, the problems with Pakistan, and the strong tilt towards Pakistan, which is really a troublesome neighbor of ours, which it is, the Americans don't know it, and which they continue to regard as a major non-NATO ally. So these are all things of concern. So we are not here to kind of provide a balance between them. We want good relations with both USA and Russia. With Russia, there's reciprocity, there's a reciprocal response from the Russian president, and therefore we get on well with them. And this has been a tradition now for a long time. So it's not only a time-tested, but a well-trusted relationship.
But
with the Americans, they will have to earn our friendship once again. This can't go on much longer. They themselves are now talking with Putin, and it shows that at least they're trying to head in the right direction. And I do hope that the end result of all of this would be USA and Russia having a better understanding and relationship, and then it also helping us move ahead, because then the tariffs would become not so relevant, the sanctions would certainly become irrelevant, and then we have to see what the attitude is on Pakistan and what it's up to.
You know, Pakistan is also a factor there, Alexei Zakharov, because you look at South Asia and you see the relationship in a way that America is building slowly with Pakistan and its military leadership. We've also seen the Pakistan leadership go to Moscow. Does Moscow see India very differently to an Islamabad Rawalpindi? That India is, as we've been saying, all-weather friend. We've gone through good times and bad. Pakistan more transactional. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I think we can't even compare Russia's relationship with India and Pakistan because the level of cooperation with Pakistan is definitely not at the same level. We have never seen any visit by Russian leader, neither in Soviet times nor in the modern Russia. And it's also reflective of the level of the relationship, to my mind. If we take economic aspect, then the bilateral trade is just around $1 billion. Yes, there was a relative rise over the past several years. Russia is exploring different areas of economic cooperation with Pakistan. Of course, there are regular talks both at political level. There are now regular parliamentary exchanges. There is a regular exchange at the level of Intergovernmental Commission. There is some track of cooperation in energy. But when you look at the cooperation between Russia and Pakistan, then it's always very good on surface. They discuss many things, but I haven't seen many outcomes. I think that the situation within Pakistan itself, their problematic economic situation, is a major hinder for that. And I think that if we compare at the level of trust, it's also not at the same level.
So you're saying India is at a completely different level. Point taken. Sure.
I mean,
but
in South Asia,
you mentioned earlier the C factor, China. I come back to it, Brahma, because China remains in many ways India's greatest challenge. In many ways, how to deal with China. Now, Russia and China have a very strong relationship. Does India raise the issue despite the fact that we are part of regional groupings like BRICS, like the SCO? Should India be taking a firmer stand to ensure, A, that Russia recognizes India's concerns vis-a-vis China?
Well, first, look at the symbolism of Putin's visit to India. The symbolism of his visit matters even more than the deliverables. This is Putin's first trip to India since the Ukraine war began. And by showing up in New Delhi, he's advertising that Russia has options beyond China. The US, as you know, by isolating Russia from Western markets, has effectively turned China into Russia's critical economic lifeline. But Putin's visit to India shows that Russia values its partnership with India and will not allow itself to become a junior partner to Beijing. And India, by hosting Putin, is making clear that it rejects the Western-imposed binary of with us or against us. India's message is that it will chart its own independent path, including treating Russia as a reliable long-term partner, especially when Washington has been treating India with a casual disregard that borders on strategic negligence. And we should not forget one thing that that Rory Suchet underlined, which is that the China factor has been central to India's partnership with Moscow, and it goes back to the 1971 war. But for that friendship treaty that India signed with the Soviet Union, Nixon administration, President Nixon had been egging on China to intervene, to open another front against India. It was that friendship treaty with Moscow that prevented China from opening a military front against India when there was genocide going on in East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh, through a short Indian military intervention. So the China factor has been central to India's partnership with Moscow right since the early 1970s. And even today, if you look at the geography, Russia is to the north of China, and India is to the south of China. And Russia-India partnership is critical to imposing discrete checks on Chinese power. The only missing link in this bigger picture is that America, instead of recognizing Russia's importance vis-a-vis China, has pushed Russia closer to China through unprecedented sanctions against Moscow.
And some of those sanctions, of course, are hurting India as well, Rory, because here you've got India, which was doing oil deals with Russia, and Putin imposes 25% additional penalties. He doesn't do it with other parts of Europe, which have also done deals with Russia. So the hypocrisy, the double standards comes out. Should a stronger message therefore be sent by Russia and India at the meeting that will take place also to Washington? That you cannot have this global hypocrisy anymore in this multipolar world order.
It is fascinating. I think you raise a very, very good point. Let's keep in mind that a fair amount of the oil that goes from Russia to India is being sold off to America's European allies. And so when Trump is trying to tariff/sanction India for buying this Russian oil, he's actually de facto sanctioning his friends forever across the European Union. Now, let's keep this in mind. When the conflict in Ukraine kicked off, the European Union quickly said, we're not going to buy any more Russian energy. We're not going to put so-called money into Putin's so-called war coffers. Well, what happened? Exactly what Vladimir Putin said would happen. The sanctions boomerang. Right now, the European economy is in stagnation. It is barely reaching 1% growth. The forecast is atrocious. Meantime, the economies of the BRICS countries and Russia in particular doing very well. Russia is looking at 3% growth. Russia is now the most sanctioned country in the world, and yet its economy is the fourth largest in the world in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity. This is something that Vladimir Putin warned the West about. You sanction me, those sanctions will boomerang. Meantime, as Europe tries to fund the Kiev regime with money it simply doesn't have, what does the future hold for Europe? It looks disastrous as the multipolar world now is taking the lead. We are witnessing the economic financial infrastructure of the world heading east. The Euro-Atlantic Alliance is trying to keep its grip, but its grip is watching the world slide through its hands like grains and granules of sand. There is a new world order in town. And this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump is tariffing and sanctioning all these countries around the world to stall their growth and try to put them in their place. It's too little, too late. Hello, new polycentric world order.
Can I therefore ask you in conclusion, Rory, there will be those, of course, who will say there is a moral position that India must take in support of Ukraine. I've heard it from a number of European nation ambassadors, but from others as well. There is a moral position that the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine was invaded by Russia. What will you tell those who will say that Vladimir Putin will also have to answer to certain stands that he's taken vis-a-vis Ukraine in terms of Russian expansionism? A quick final comment.
Who financed the Maidan coup of 2014?
Rory, go ahead.
Who ousted the democratically elected leader of Ukraine? The United States, the State Department admitted we spent $5 billion ousting the democratically elected leadership of Ukraine in 2014. Let me assure you, the conflict did not start a few years ago. The conflict started in 2014. When you want to achieve regime change in a country, what do? You sanction it and you try, as Washington said, to bring it to its knees. That has failed. The only thing that has worked with the sanctions is it's brought Europe economically to its knees. It's a classic play out of Langley, Virginia, when they want to achieve regime change. Either you do it physically, forcibly, militarily, or you sanction a country to such a level that the populace becomes so dissatisfied that the public achieves the regime change for Washington. They wanted that to happen in Moscow. Guess what? All these sanctions, all this Russophobia, all this anti-Russia rhetoric has only galvanized the Russian public around the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The support for the Kremlin in Russia to date has never been stronger.
Rory Suchet, I must confess, I look forward to listening to you on RT. You make some wonderful observations from, of course, a Russian perspective, but it's good to have you on the show and my other guests. Good to have you all. We'll have plenty more of you. The visit starts tomorrow. Remember, of course, India Today is getting that world exclusive interview with Vladimir Putin. We will have it on air same time tomorrow and excerpts right through the day tomorrow along with special guests. Okay, let's turn to the story that's breaking at the moment, and it concerns Indigo Airlines. Indigo's check-in systems have collapsed in different parts of the country, and that disruption has impacted flights across India. At least 85 Indigo flights have been delayed or cancelled today. DGCA has now asked Indigo to present facts related to the disruption. Indigo has apologized, says working round the clock. Indigo flyers have been asked to check flight status beforehand. Let's get a quick word in from Amit Bhardwaj. He tracks the Civil Aviation Ministry. Amit, this almost seems unprecedented in terms of number of flights delayed or cancelled in a single day in a very long time. What really is the problem? Tell us.
Rajdeep, just breaking down the numbers for our viewers, at only 4 major airports across India, Mumbai, Delhi, Ahmedabad and Hyderabad today, over 100 flights of Indigo have been cancelled. And for the month of November, these numbers go up to 1,200. So that itself, reflects the kind of volume of cancellations that is happening at Indigo, as well as the delay in operation. That list is quite longer. Now, if you go to the root of the cause, it seems all fingers seems to be pointing at the different stakeholders, sources that I've spoken to, who are aware of the developments. They have been constantly pointing at the FDTL new regime, which is the flight duty time limitations new regime, which was implemented, came into force in November 2025. And in November itself, you have the numbers of cancellations at Indigo spiking to 1,200. Now, Indigo has apologized for the inconvenience. DGCA is also saying that technical failures, ATC, FDTA compliance, all of this are the major reasons for these cancellations and operational delays. Back to you.
Okay, Amit Bhardwaj, we'll wait and see how this plays off. Let's hope it ends sooner rather than later. I want to turn to another issue of great public concern, the meltdown in the rupee. That's right, the rupee has breached the 90 rupee mark for the first time vis-a-vis the dollar. The Indian currency touched a low of 90.29 mid on persistent dollar demand from importers and foreign portfolio investors. The fall was also accelerated by the absence of dollar sales by the Reserve Bank of India. The 90 level was crossed moments into trade. This morning it caused some panic. Dealers say the next support level cannot be as estimated with the dollar rupee surge at this pace. The rupee has fallen 5% this year, one of the worst performing currencies in the continent of Asia at the moment. Big questions. What explains the rupee slide? Trump's tariffs impacting the rupee, time for RBI to step in. And let me add another question. Is it good or a bad thing? Two very formidable guests joining me. Sajid Chinoy, Managing Director, Chief India Economist at JP Morgan. Surjit Bhalla, former Executive Director, IMF. I want to come to you, Sajid, first, because I read an interesting article that you... Sajid, I read an interesting article that you've written in the Business Standard, where you've given 4 reasons why you think it's not a bad thing to have a falling rupee. Explain to us why you actually believe a falling rupee is not such a bad thing.
Thank you, Rajdeep. Good evening. Good to be here. Number one, we should not conflate a strong currency for a strong economy. In fact, what history has taught us is countries that have grown very rapidly have often done so and been able to drive export growth by keeping their currencies relatively undervalued. Why is that? Because when a currency depreciates, what happens? Your exports become more competitive. You can drive stronger export growth, number one. Your imports become more expensive, and therefore you give a better chance to your import competitors at home. So in a way, a weaker currency is helping your manufacturing sector, both on the export front and on the import front, right? Number one. Number two, the current context really matters over here, right? Think of what's happening at the moment. Tariffs on India by the US are the highest in the world. The effective tariff rate is 34%. Tariffs on our ASEAN competitors are 16%, which means we're at a competitive disadvantage. If the rupee were to weaken to try and bridge some of that gap, we're actually helping offset some of that adverse tariff differential and giving our exporters the best possible chance. Number three, I think the big threat to emerging markets in the coming years is all this massive excess capacity in China. With the US putting on tariffs on China, what is China doing? It's redirecting this excess capacity to all over the world, Asia, India. India's bilateral trade deficit with China is 3% of GDP. Now, a lot of Indian businessmen will say, we won't invest in India because it's very hard to compete with cheap Chinese imports. So when you have, calibrated depreciation, again, you're making those Chinese imports a little bit more expensive and giving Indian domestic substitutes a better chance. So I think, we really should not confuse a strong currency for a strong economy and likewise a weak currency for a weak economy. The final thing I'll say, Rajdeep, is, this notion of the rupee is made a lifetime high. Every day when I get older, my age is at a lifetime high, right? Every day. And so looking at levels is sometimes very deceptive. India's inflation rate historically has been 4 to 5%. Global inflation has been 2%. To maintain our external competitiveness, a 3, 4, 5% rupee depreciation is par for the course and should not be alarming at all.
It's interesting the way you're putting it, because Surjit Bhalla, I recall 2013, when the rupee fell to what, 58.50 to the dollar, and Prime Minister Modi, then Chief Minister Gujarat, had targeted the Manmohan Singh government and said this was more evidence of a faltering economy, of a fragile economy. Now we've got Sajid Chinoy explaining why it's not such a bad idea to have a depreciating rupee, and actually a falling rupee doesn't necessarily mean a weak economy. Is 2025 very different to 2013?
Yeah, in several ways, it's very different than 2013. And, for one, our growth rate is very high, especially compared to our competitors. Second, the inflation rate in India is very low. So therefore, what is a surprise is, why is the currency weakening? The fundamentals are all in favor of a stronger rupee, not a weaker rupee. So what Sajid and others have to explain is why, in this scenario of a highest growth rate amongst all our competitors, lowest inflation rate amongst all our competitors, as Sajid himself will tell you, that's a recipe for a strengthening rupee, not a recipe for a weakening rupee. Second or third, that India's real exchange rate is now at about 20% lower, 25% lower. He has the calculations, he'll tell you, than it should be. So therefore, our currency is very, very competitive now. Our growth rate is very high. Our inflation rate is very low. So I think we all need to ask the question, why in this scenario, and there are not too many scenarios like this for any currency in the world, where you weaken when in the face of strong economic fundamentals.
So let me take that to you, Sajid. Explain that. We are, arguably one of the worst performing, if not the worst performing currency in Asia. So it's all very well to say there are benefits from the rupee depreciating, but the truth of the matter is, surely it should cause some concern if this becomes a free fall. It's 5% down over the year.
So 2 points, Rajdeep. Well, let me answer Surjit's question about why the currency is under depreciating pressure, and then let's distinguish between a free fall and what's happening right now. It's undoubtedly true our macro fundamentals are much better. The inflation rate's very low, growth has picked up. But the fact is, over the last 18 months, the balance of payments has been in deficit. Surjit, this year, as you will know, the current account deficit is on track to doubling. Now, it's not a threatening level, but last year it was 0.6% of GDP. This year it's going to be 1.3% of GDP, in large part because gold prices have surged, gold imports have been high, and the current account is much wider. Capital flows, to be fair, have been slowing in the last 18 months, 2 years. We've seen FDI flow slow. We've seen equity flow slow because equities have rotated out of India into China, and bond inflows have been softer. So the fact is, the balance of payments has been in deficit. This is not some engineered depreciation by the rupee. Quite the contrary. The RBI has been intervening all year long to slow the pace of depreciation. And you have to ask yourself, at what point is it worth spending $50 billion or $100 billion to slow the pace of depreciation to its new equilibrium? When the balance of payments dynamics changes, Sujit will agree, the rupee has to find a new lower equilibrium. And I would argue, Rajdeep, in March, the rupee was at 87.50. 7 months later, if 87.50 goes to 90 rupees, that's a 2.5% decline, or a 5% decline is hardly threatening. This is not some crisis that's happening. This is the RBI making a conscious choice that in the wake of a balance of payments deficit, it's not prudent for the RBI to be selling its reserves constantly to prevent much needed adjustment, because that also has costs. When the RBI sells its reserves, it tightens liquidity and pushes up domestic interest rates. So policy making is all about trade-offs, and I think the RBI has chosen the right path, that let there be calibrated depreciation to respond to changing fundamentals.
Very interestingly put. Surjit, let me give you a final word. What lies ahead? You always like to forecast. Your political forecast can be on and off, if I may say so, but you want to give us an economic forecast for what will happen over the next 3 months?
No, I think what we need to address is, why is a rupee weakening? And I have got two explanations for it, and none of which I think my dear friend Sajid would disagree with. First, FDI into India has collapsed. Net FDI into India today is about 0.09% of GDP, which is the lowest level since 1990. That is 1 year before the crisis. Second, I think the elephant in the room, which I'm sure Sajid knows about and everybody else, is the lack, or the seeming lack, of a trade deal. You have the trade deal tomorrow or day after, and Sajid and all of us will all be talking about a strengthening rupee, because that's a normal thing to happen. This is the fastest decline in the value of the rupee ever. So let's backtrack a little bit. This is not engineered by the RBI. This has shocked the RBI, and has so much so that I think the decline in the repo, much needed decline in the repo rate, may not happen, because the RBI will feel, oh my God, I'm trying to prevent the rupee from falling. So this has macro consequences for growth and for RBI. So this is not a story, very simple, of current account balance and whatever. Everything is in rosy shape in India, except the fact,
Sajid, you want to get 30 seconds? Because these are two very different points. Surjit almost seems to suggest that it's not a don't worry, be happy kind of situation. There should be some concerns, including shown by the RBI. Very quick response.
No doubt with Surjit. I agree with both of Surjit's points. The real answer should be, how do we boost FDI flows into India? And yes, how do we try and get a trade deal with the US? Those are the fundamental issues. Holding that constant, in the absence of those two things, what is the best response? And the best response is, at that point, let the rupee be the shock absorber to the economy till those two fundamental issues get resolved, which I agree with Surjit on.
Let's leave it there. There's the trade deal concerns, there are FDI concerns, and these are all legitimate concerns that we have. But I appreciate two fine minds joining us and trying to demystify the falling rupee. Thank you both, Sajid Chinoy and Surjit Bhalla, for joining us on the news today. Let's turn to tonight's Get Real India story. A central university instituted in Assam as a part of the 1985 Assam Accord is now in ferment. The students are agitating, professors are refusing to do work, corruption, financial mismanagement, and the prolonged absence of a center-appointed vice-chancellor has pushed Tezpur University in Assam to the brink. Tonight's Get Real India story comes from a part of the country that doesn't get enough attention. Take a look.
Tezpur University, a central university born out of the Assam Accord, is today under total lockdown. Gates shut, classes suspended, and a campus in revolt. For nearly 2 months now, students and teachers have been out on the streets demanding the removal of Vice Chancellor Shambhunath Singh. They accuse him of corruption, manipulation, and almost never being on campus.
हर स्तर पर वो चाहे एडमिशन हो, प्रमोशन हो या अपॉइंटमेंट हो, हर लेवल पर करप्शन का जो कहते हैं कदाचार का एक हाइट वो ले गए हैं. हमारा विश्वविद्यालय बचा रहे, इसका प्रेस्टीज बचा रहे, हमारे विद्यार्थियों का भविष्य बचा रहे, बस इसी के लिए हम इकट्ठे हुए.
When we request him for some support, this is not for our personal thing, for training the students and other things. We are not getting, even our files won't move fast. It will be going either to FO's office or to the VC's office. When we ask VC's office, they'll tell it's in FO's office. So things are not moving. And finally, who is suffering? Students. So if we question him, then again the problem comes, we will get suspensions.
I just want to request our Chief Minister, Dr. Hemanta Biswa Sharma, and our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi to interfere in this matter. Why we are going back, we are losing, Tezpur University is losing its credibility.
Their anger has been simmering for over a year. It began with allegations of rigged faculty appointments. Then came the numbers that stunned the campus. 51 official trips, 388 days away, more than half his tenure spent outside Tezpur. Students say the university was left in administrative paralysis with exam delays, unapproved files and stalled decisions. The unrest exploded in September when students urged a condolence meet for Assamese icon Zubin Garg. The Vice-Chancellor's refusal triggered a wave of fury, after which he abruptly left the campus and hasn't returned since. What followed was unprecedented. Faculty resignations, public protests, effigy burning and allegations of financial irregularity.
যেতিয়া সেই ফাইলটোত ভিচিৰ এপ্ৰুভেল লাগে, the VC office is totally non-functional at this moment. Non-functional এটা VC নাথাকিলে হয় কি, VC is an personal secretary থাকে, he should be in charge. He communicates with the Vice Chancellor for the approval either through email or through WhatsApp, whatever it is, and then the university keeps on functioning. But for the last 15-20 days, the VC's office is non-functional.
A panel appointed by the centre visited the campus in September, but its findings were never released. On November 27th, the university shut down completely. Students, teachers and staff have together declared that they won't reopen until the Vice-Chancellor is removed. The university is in a state of institutional collapse, and the appointment authority for central universities, the Union Education Ministry, remains silent. Tezpur University now stands at a breaking point, not just because of one administrator's actions, but also because of the system's failure to act. Northeast Bureau, India Today.
The kind of story you won't find on prime time elsewhere, but stories that we call Get Real India. What we also don't see often enough on prime time is good news stories. And I want to end tonight's show with a good news story of a doctor in Odisha who's giving away her life savings to help cancer patients. You want to meet Dr. Lakshmi Bai in our Good News Today story. As I say goodbye, Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar, Namaste. Bye for now.
Dr. Lakshmi Bai, a renowned gynecologist from Behrampur, will celebrate her 100th birthday on Friday. The doctor, who served society for several decades, now wants to help women cancer patients. Dr. Lakshmi Bai is donating her life savings, 3 crore and 40 lakh rupees, to AIIMS Bhubaneswar.
Always I think of God So I want to do something for that. So for in Mauritius, we don't have the treatment for cancer. So that's why I gave that money.
The trailblazer in her field, Dr. Lakshmi Bai belonged to the first MBBS batch at the SCB Medical College in Cuttack. She completed her MD in obstetrics and gynecology from Madras Medical College in 1958. Dr. Lakshmi Bai retired from the government service in 1986. With Ajay Nath, Bureau Report, India Today.